All right, let's start. My name is Chadli Sadora, and I work for the Asian People's Movement on Debt and Development. On behalf of the organizing committee, APNDD, Climate Action Network International, the Women and Gender Constituency, and the Youth Constituency at the UNFCCC, we would like to welcome distinguished experts, the panel, and all those joining us online to our event, Towards BAM, the public hearings on the Just Transition Mechanism. For the past few years, civil society has been engaging intensively on just transition at global climate conferences as a means to ensure that all aspects of climate change and climate action embrace the need for securing justice for workers, indigenous peoples and communities, and support all countries in their efforts to find pathways for their people's prosperity. COP30 constituted a major landmark for advancing justice, equity, and rights through just transition. A decision was taken outlining key principles that must be taken into account when advancing just transition. On top of that, and critical to civil society demands, it committed to develop for decision in 2026 a just transition mechanism that will make all those principles and aspects be materialized. Our groups outlined several demands regarding the mechanism, which we have called the BAM, or that now stands for the Belem Antalya Mechanism for Just Transition. As we prepare for the next round of negotiations, we wanted to hear from experts and practitioners well beyond their constituencies, their thoughts on how we can make the just transition mechanism work, learning from past experiences, and accelerating good work happening on the ground. Instead of holding those conversations privately, we have decided to hold them publicly and for the benefit of a much larger audience. In this first session for today, we are honored to be joined by Camilla Roman from the International Labour Organization. Camilla is the Senior Technical Specialist of the Priority Action Program on Just Transition at the International Labour Organization. Her work focuses on supporting member states in policies that promote job creation and social justice in climate action, leading the development and implementation of tools, projects, and partnerships. In her previous postings in India, Thailand, and Cambodia, she managed programs on productivity, working conditions, and environmental practices in small and medium enterprises and on responsible business conduct in supply chains. Camilla holds a doctorate from the University of Oxford on learning and innovation in clusters and industrial districts. We'll hear a brief presentation from Camilla, followed by an interactive exchange with representatives from civil society. For this session, we have a few of our allies, comrades, and colleagues: Kuda from the Climate Action Network, Carmen from Youngos, or the Youth Constituency in the UNFCCC, and Felicitos from the Women and Gender Constituency. So I'll pass it now to you, Camilla, for your presentation.
Many thanks, Chadli, and thank you as well for the invitation and for bringing together experts, constituencies, and parties for this dialogues. I believe, as you well know, that really the contributions that the constituency have had in the discussions around the work program have really been instrumental to the outcome that we had at COP30. So it's great that you're keeping the good work to push the agenda and the discussion forward. So let me, as you anticipated, share some slides that provide an overview of the ILO and our work on just transition and some reflections on what we are seeing as learnings and observations that could be relevant for the discussions of the mechanism itself. I'm gonna try to see if this works. I hope that you can see my slides. I see nodding, so yes, let me get ahead. So a few things that I will cover today in my presentation before we open up to the discussion. Couple of words on the ILO and the ILO guidelines and the resolution, just to set the scene and understand where I'm coming from. The second part of the presentation looks at what kind of support on just transition we provide to countries and giving some illustration and examples of what this means in practice when it comes to international cooperation, capacity development, and knowledge sharing. and then I will close with some learnings and reflections. So as many of you know, the ILO is a UN specialized agency and is the agency that is dedicated to the world of work in the UN systems. Well, our members include 187 member states and they are tripartite. And that's something unique in the UN system because it's not just governments that are members, but it's also trade unions and employers organizations. The ILO mandate is about advancing social justice and promoting decent work. And how do we do that? Is by setting and supervising the application of international labor standards, as well as providing knowledge, capacity development, and technical assistance to countries on employment creation, rights at work, social protection, and social dialogue. And of course, all the policies and programmatic instruments that help those four key aspects of what we call the decent work agenda. An important piece of our engagement and our work is to look at the changes that are happening and the forces that are driving impacts in labor markets. And in particular, the ones that are emerging now are technology, demographic change, and environmental change. And that, of course, means it's also a lot about climate change in there. And that's where our just transition work fits. Let me say also a couple of words on the ILO guidelines and the International Labour Conference resolution. As we know, the ILO guidelines are also mentioned in the COP30 decision of the work program. So again, spending a moment to share where they're coming from and what they're really about. So they are about providing a set of principles and policy entry points for countries to advance a just transition, while recognizing the need for a just transition to be grounded in national circumstances and priorities, so acknowledging that there is no one size fits all. And they also acknowledge the importance of international cooperation. They're about fostering a just transition that promotes environmentally sustainable economies in a way that is inclusive by creating decent work, reducing inequality, and leaving no one behind. Where are they coming from? And that's an important thing to bear in mind. It's not something that the ILO as an office put together, but they have been endorsed by 187 member states of the ILO at the 111th International Labour Conference in 2023. In a nutshell, they look at the content and how what we should look for when advancing a just transition. So the what, and that's really about promoting sustainable, job-rich economies on the one hand, while ensuring social equity on the other. But they're also looking at the process. So social dialogue, the underpinning of rights. And the aspects of financing. In terms of the entry points, as I mentioned earlier, there are a number of policy areas that are highlighted as entry points for countries to take into account when advancing a just transition. And they go from microeconomic to growth policies to industrial and sectoral policies, enterprises, skills development, occupational health and safety, social protection, active labor markets policies, rights, and social dialogue and tripartism. And the resolution itself also acknowledged the importance of broader stakeholder participation. When we look at the guidelines, how it's important to think of them not as a static document, but as an instrument for countries, for social partners, for civil society and other stakeholders in thinking about how just transition could be helped and advanced in a given country context. And the guidelines and the resolution also form the bedrock for us to provide assistance to countries. How do we work? We work through developing knowledge by providing capacity building and knowledge sharing, by offering technical assistance, and by strengthening social dialogue and broad stakeholder participations on just transition policies. Just to give an idea on what kind of issues we help member states with. Let's say that we have a phase down of coal in coal mining regions, and this creates loss of jobs and a decline in economic growth. We engage in countries in devising reskilling and upskilling programs, in looking at how to promote economic diversification, for instance, for value chain development, and strengthening social protection to address the needs of adversely impacted workers. What issues do we help countries to address, for instance, when it comes to the impacts of climate change, let's say in the rural economies, that lower productivity and undermines the livelihoods of workers and communities? Gain social protection an important piece, so strengthening coverage and responsiveness to climate change impacts for worker households and communities. Scaling up access to climate smart inputs with attention to groups in situation of vulnerabilities, including, for instance, through a value chain approach, and strengthening and orienting public employment programs for locally owned infrastructure and assets. And for instance, it could be watershed development, depending on the priorities of the communities. A last example, renewable energy development holds the opportunity of creating jobs, but also generate some skills gaps. And then we have risks and opportunities, economic and social, in the critical mineral supply chains. So what could be done in that regard is promoting approaches that maximize job-rich growth and local economic development, so benefiting the local economy and the local workers and communities, promoting skills development to enhance access to jobs, but also to attract investments, and promoting core labor standards, supporting countries in promoting and ensuring core labor standards. When we look at the technical types of technical assistance that we offer to countries in terms of policy and programmatic instruments, we think about three lines that have emerged as requests and interests from countries. One is how to embed employment, decent work, and just transition in climate policies and follow-up instruments. The second is how to embed environmental and just transition considerations in employment, enterprise, and social policies and programs. And the final one is how to bring it together through just transition plans and strategies, or in mainstreaming just transition in national development plans underpinned by finance. Examples of our work in the three areas, for instance, is the support to countries in the integration of just transition in the NDC 3.0 that we are coming to finishing line to, working with countries on the extension of social protection systems and enhancing their responsiveness to climate shocks, or helping them on skills, qualification, and TVET programs to meet, for instance, the needs of the energy transition, and supporting countries on planning for a just transition, either at the local or national level. We work in a range of countries and world regions. As you see there are some examples of countries with whom we've collaborated with through various types of support. Examples of international cooperation we have is the ILO BMZ social partners as agents of change projects that really tries to put social dialogue at the heart of just transition and climate policy making. The SIDA ILO partnership that has a just transition component focusing on NDCs and other aspects of knowledge generation. The EU Ghana Pact for Skills that focuses on skills for green jobs. The Partnership for Action for a Green Economy, where we are working with another 4 UN agencies, and the EkiJet project, Innovation Region for a Just Energy Transition, where we are operating with a range of consortium partners, including JZ, CAN, and others, to support core regions in a just transition. I'll say a couple of words on capacity development and knowledge sharing, because they're an important aspect also of the mechanism itself, and share a little bit what our approach is. The first point to note is that we see capacity development as integral and connected to other types of assistance to countries, so technical assistance on policy making, for instance, or knowledge generation. So the three areas really come together. We have a strong emphasis on strengthening institutional and technical capacity buildings and having a tailored approach, because we know that even different line ministries are in different places when it comes to just transition, and we need to have common understanding and to build the specific skills. And we also put a strong emphasis on building capacities of social partners, because it's not just a matter of advocating participation and social dialogue, but social partners is to be ready to provide meaningful engagement, to engage meaningfully and with substantive inputs in those processes. And we've got a range of training course and offers at the national and international level on various topics. We also work on knowledge sharing, and again, it's linked to other types of assistance. What we try to do is to leverage on-the-ground experience and to foster cross-country exchanges. It builds typically on tools and guidance that we develop and we apply to country support, but then we also try to share. It's delivered through face-to-face and virtual fora, and it's facilitated also through online platforms. And we've got a range of examples there, ranging from international workshops and peer-to-peer exchanges to the COP pavilion. I'll just share and with a couple of a preview, let's say, of the Just Transition Policy Gateway. This is an initiative that we started to conceive and develop at the end of our International Labour Conference in 2023, and is now going to be ready to launch in Q2 of this year. And it's the first dedicated platform for sharing policy experiences on just transition. It's a curated platform that connects constituents and partners with a curated and searchable collections of policy strategies and action plan that connects the social equity and decent work on the one hand with environmental sustainability on the other. And it will be complemented by policy help desks that enable countries and constituents to access tools and tailor support on their efforts on just transition. And that will come later on towards the end of the year. These are just some preview of what the gateway looks like. And as you see, it provides a range of information from different country experiences, and then it dives a bit deeper on certain aspects of the policy experience itself, as well as access to the actual documents. It's part of a project financed by BMZ, and of course it's something that we are gonna look for partnerships with, both in terms of technical partners and knowledge partners, but also additional funding partners, and that's something that the modalities of engagement will be developed soon. I'll end with some reflections and learnings that we've gathered in the course of our support and experiences on helping countries and constituencies on just transition. The first is that awareness of just transition has grown considerably, but there's still it's still uneven, I would say, and so it depends who you're speaking to, and it depends on the type of actors that you're working with, and that capacity development needs evolve, and so they are becoming increasingly sophisticated. The second is that systemic approaches are really essential, and so they require a focus on policies and institutions rather than just ad hoc interventions. But at the same time, there is the need to connect the systemic approaches with bottom-up experiences. And we also need to look at some quick or medium-term results or wins, because some of these processes extend for long periods of time, and it can create some frustrations and in terms of seeing progress. The third is that meaningful social dialogue and stakeholder engagement are key, and they have to be stepped up across the board. Again, we see some promises, some promising developments, but more needs to be done. The fourth is that silos, departments or ministries or organizations working in their own lane are still there. And for a just transition, it's really important to build bridges across expertise on climate, with expertise on labor, with expertise on economics, with expertise on industrial development, and of course, expertise and experience from different types of stakeholders. So I think there's a lot of work that is being done there, but again, we need more. Silos are very hard to break. And it's really important to create common understandings and navigating also tensions and competitions. The fifth point is financing. No surprise there. Financing, a just transition remains a challenge, particularly for developing countries. While there is a lot of traction on policy developments, the finance puzzle is still there to be not been solved, of course, and that's related to broader issues in terms of finance. And then finally, just transition has gained attention, but is still at the margin of most climate investment projects and climate funds. And it's both a bit of a demand and supply issue. So how the funds themselves operate and prioritize, but it's also in terms of developing a pipeline of projects. And the extent to which just transition considerations are reflected or not. Let me end there, and I'll hand it back to you, Chadley. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Camilla. That was a very insightful presentation. And what struck me really was how many of the existing work of ILO, the functions, the knowledge sharing, capacity building, and the technical assistance, they're actually the functions of the just transition mechanism, or the ones established by the just transition mechanism. So it's clear, very clear, how important the role of the ILO could be in a just transition mechanism. And perhaps we can further deepen a discussion of how the ILO contributes to the work of the potential work of the JT mechanism and vice versa in the next phase of our session. I will now pass it on to the CSO panel. I'd just like to note and welcome Hajar, who entered from Angry and Demand Climate Justice, who entered our discussion midstream. So I'd just like to, for the CSO panelists to ask one question each, and then one round of questioning, and then pass it to you, Camilla, to respond. And then if we have time, because we have to end promptly at 6:50, we can have another round of questions. So perhaps I'll pass it now to Kuda first.
Thanks, Chadley, and I'm disappointed that I only have one question for now, so I'll try stick to one. Hopefully, I'll get the second one. But thanks so much, Camilla, for presenting something that's really passionate to me personally, but also the great work that ILO is doing. My question really is focusing more on the reflections and learnings, at least my first question. And I wanted to ask, how then can the mechanism potentially advance some of the great work that the ILO is already doing in terms of just transition based on the reflections and learnings that you've got from ILO? I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thanks, Kuda. I'll pass it now to Carmen.
Yeah, thank you so much. My question goes into a similar direction. I was wondering, because we heard from a lot of parties, kind of the concern about duplicating efforts. So my question is really, how can we draw upon these existing initiative and programs of the ILO and really integrate and advance them through the just transition mechanism?
Thanks, Carmen. Felicitas?
Hey, thank you. My question was leaning towards the dynamic of social dialogues, looking at the political sensitivity when it comes to labor organizations and trade unions on social dialogues. How do you foresee that working out in the BAM? Thank you.
Thanks, Felicitas. And Hajar, please go ahead.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Thank you, Chadley, for giving me the space. I have one question for now. So, like the just transition mechanism would have the civil society a seat on the table. So from your experience and learning reflections, how do you perceive like youth space within this table, especially like youth representative from global South, given the context of emerging wars and colonialism approach and lots of limitation of speeches, but free speeches going on in there? Like what the limitations or opportunities you see?
Thanks, Hajar. Very great question. So Camilla, I think we have about 21 minutes to be able to address these questions, but I'm sure we'll be able to meaningfully discuss all of them. Go ahead, please, Camilla.
Thanks, Chadley, and thanks a lot to the panelists for the important questions you raised. So let me just go ahead with a few of them. So, how can the mechanism advance the work of the ILO, and also taking into account some of these reflections and learning that Kuda mentioned? So I think if I have to really pick a couple of things, one is that if the mechanism manages to make these initiatives more visible and accessible to a wider number and a broader range of stakeholders, be it like governments, civil society, and so on, I think it would be a great service, because sometimes it's that there's like information is a bit scattered, and I mean, for sure, also from our side, we don't reach all that we would like to reach. So in a way, I think it's good. It would be good if the mechanism manages to give visibility and a greater access to information about these various initiatives, so that they can be taken up. And the second is also that perhaps it could help to generate some ideas, and there is where there is the scope of for scaling and replications, and this comes a little bit on the point of this disconnect between systemic approaches and grassroots or bottom-up approaches. I think the BAM could be a very interesting space for that, because what we do find is that you have a lot of very interesting initiatives at the grassroots, but they stay very small scale. And on the other hand, you have a lot of work that happens at the level of policies, institutions, which I really think it's key, because if you just have the ad hoc approaches, we are not going to get the impact and the sustainability that we are after. But the two are quite often quite far. So I think if there was a modality for the mechanism to also showcase some of the promising experiences that could be then linked to policies or linked to a greater access to finance and so on, I think it would be very meaningful. And that's that's something that I think could prove valuable in terms of the mechanism itself. I also find that the issue of cracking some of the hard nuts of just transition would be an important piece of the work of the mechanism. I think it would be good to really find a way to create spaces. Maybe there could be different spaces in the mechanism itself. I don't know, it's early phases, and obviously we'd be very keen to hear parties and constituencies' views. But that also help to really have genuine experience sharing, not just a showcase, which of course could be part of the work, but also to reflect on learnings or how the hard parts of just transitions went about, and some of the questions, for instance, how do you ensure social dialogue and stakeholder participations in investment projects? That's something that, frankly speaking, you have investors that might be willing to do it, but they find it hard to figure out how that works out in practice, and vice versa. Obviously, there is a lot of challenges faced by social partners or by civil society organization in getting into the participation and consultations on investment projects. So how can we find the challenges and how can we find maybe some promising approaches that can help solve that. Carmen, you speak about the concern for duplications, and of course that's an important piece, an important issue to bear in mind as the mechanism will take shape. From our point of view, we see the ILO stands ready to contribute. So if the mechanism takes a form in which, for instance, our initiatives, be it on the gateway or the response mechanism, that can be featured, we would be very happy to contribute to the, let's say, implementation of the mechanism through this knowledge sharing, these technical systems, and so forth. So obviously, together with other partners that would need to come in with their own mandates and with their own area of expertise, and that could complement the experiences of the ILO and others. So I think that if there is a way that the mechanism can connect, give visibility, and to what's there, it would be an important way to address the issue of duplication. The second one is also for the mechanism to reflect on gaps or things that need to be adjusted in relation to advancing a just transition, for instance, for international cooperation and so on. And I think that will be important because having some kind of discussion or some kind of tracing of issues that maybe are under supported or are fell through the cracks in terms of technical support for a just transition would be an important area to signal that through the mechanism. Felicitas, you mentioned the point on social dialogue. Indeed, so for us, by the way, we would think that it's an essential piece of the mechanism is a governance, and a governance that is inclusive. And we do hope to have in there, of course, the trade unions, the employers and business membership organizations as key players of social dialogue, as well as this very rich range of constituency groups that have been so active in the just transition space nationally, but also internationally and internationally. So the point on social dialogue, I think it depends on the space you're looking at. So if it's a matter of the participation in the mechanism itself, I think it's a discussion, right? And I think there have been already important points made for the participations of the other constituencies in the mechanism itself. If you're referring to the national level, there are mechanisms of social dialogue that are established very often in many countries, and they are we not only have international labor standards of social dialogue, but we also have often national legislation or national mechanism. And typically they involve either trade unions and employers, or trade unions, employers, and governments. There are some cases where there's also a fourth, civil society, like in the case of South Africa, but typically it's bipartite or tripartite. Now, this does not mean that just transition doesn't include other stakeholder participation. And indeed, in the resolution, it's very clear that social dialogue is fundamental, but there is the broader stakeholder participation is also key. And in fact, there are a number of countries that are working out processes in which they bring in the tripartite constituents, or they bring in the tripartite bodies, but then they also link it or find ways to connect them with stakeholder participation processes, with communities, with indigenous people, and so on. So I think it's important to bear in mind that indeed there are distinctions, but that there are a lot of experiences now that try to bring social dialogue as well as broad stakeholder participation in informing and developing just transition policy. And of course, it's down to the national stakeholders to come up with something that works and is appropriate for their context. I'll spend a moment also talking about Ajar, you mentioned the point on the youth having a seat of the at the table, and of course the challenges, political circumstances that we are facing. I mean, that's something very broad. I think probably pertains also UNFCCC processes in general. So I think it's something that it's important to reflect on. But I think securing a seat at the table in itself is a fundamental contribution that the mechanism could bring in terms of providing a space to have a voice and share concerns and have not be, let's say, marginal to the discussions, but have really a proper say to the discussion around the mechanism. So indeed, I think this engagement and the discussion around the governance will be really key. I've tried to be brief in case we manage to have some further discussions, but also happy to dwell a bit longer on some of these questions. For instance, I know that there is a lot more to say, of course, in terms of the role of the mechanism and how it connects to the ILO work or these issues around duplication. So happy to pick up again any of those, or if there are any other questions. Back to you, Shadi.
Go ahead, Camilla. I think it would be very good to deepen our discussion on those points you just said, on the role of the ILO, etc.
All right, thanks. So yeah, in terms of let's say the mechanism and the space that it provides, we do find that while there is a broad understanding of just transition that is taking shape, and hopefully we have a good basis there thanks to the work program, thanks to the guidelines and so on. There is still a value in having a mechanism because it does help this common understanding, so that we don't have I don't really like the term, but it's gaining popularity, this just transition washing, right? That is a bit of a danger. Like you risk being, just transition risks being a victim of its own success. So by the fact that it's gaining importance, it's gaining visibility, it also risks being watered down because it's a term that can be used and might be seen as appealing, but then if we don't have some of the fundamentals there, it can really detract from the efforts of promoting a genuine just transition. So I think the mechanism, by creating the space for parties, for constituencies to come together, it's really key. In terms of there is one area that I think it would be important to reflect on, and it's not that I have solutions, it's more like questions, but it's the link with negotiations. Because on the one hand, it's important that there is a link to negotiations, or either through the work program itself or through the mechanism. But at the same time, it's important because having a link to negotiations, for instance, can help the scope of the mechanism to some extent. But on the other hand, I think it would be also important to have spaces that are marked as non-negotiated space. I mean, the spaces that are not negotiations or are not formally feeding into a negotiation process. Because if we're talking about discussions around knowledge sharing, for instance, and when we talked earlier to this point about trying to crack some of the hard problems on just transition or trying to bring certain solutions to scale, I think there you need really first some quite technical and some genuine type of exchanges that in a way need to be quite open. So I think having really these spaces for exchange are important, and these spaces for exchange also should not be treated in isolation through discussions around support, because as I was saying earlier, if we think that one of the things that the mechanism could do would be to feature some of the interesting initiatives or solutions that could benefit from being scale up, systematized. I don't like the word replicated, but let's say taken forth and taken up in other countries or places. That can be linked to the support. So I think also thinking about the connections between the various functions of the mechanism would be important. I think the other point that for us would be interesting, again going back to the questions of what we could do and what could be useful in advancing our work, is there's connections, because sometimes even within the same countries or the same organization, you've got different people working on just transition in different spaces, or you've got people that are working on climate that are not necessarily familiar with the employment or labor side, even though I think the groups of the negotiations of the work programs have gone a long way. But in other negotiation streams, for instance, the familiarity with social equity or labor issues is not that extensive. And so I think also reflecting how the mechanism can build bridges and connections and common understanding and ways in which it can bring some reflections that actors can take to their own negotiation streams, to their own work, and so on, I think is going to be key. And finally, maybe also on that point, a reflection on how do we bring in different communities of practice? Because on the one hand, you can't talk about finance for a just transition without having the financial actors in there, or you can't have you can't talk about technology without having the technology experts. But at the same time, you don't want to duplicate that, and I think it's important to manage well the ways that the mechanism can make connections without creating duplications with the other negotiation streams, because that's a concern, that if we are just reproducing the conversations that are being had in other negotiation streams, then it's going to be a challenge, both in terms of the impact, but also the efficiency of the mechanism itself. So building bridges, avoiding duplications, I think that's going to be an important way to think about the contribution of the mechanism itself.
Thanks, Camilla. I think those are very excellent points. I particularly like your point on the recognizing the existing disconnect with just transitions that are already happening on the ground at a small scale, with discussions at the policy level and even at the negotiations, and how the mechanism, one of its main roles could be to connect all of these together to produce concrete policies or guidance for everyone on what needs support, on what just transition principles can be applied elsewhere, etc. Yeah, I think building bridges is really one of the biggest functions of the just transition space, of the just transition mechanism, especially in this existing situation we have the crisis of multilateralism, coinciding with all these different spaces not being able to connect, institutions, think tanks not being connected to NGOs, not being connected to grassroots organizations, social movements, and the mechanism, as the ILO has recognized, has a very big role in coordinating all of this. And I think your insights have been very concrete and has given us a lot of food for thought in framing our demands, especially as civil society and observer constituencies in the UNFCCC, especially in the upcoming negotiations on the operationalization of the just transition mechanism. So thanks very much again, Camilla, for those excellent insights. And this is on YouTube, and we can come back to this again and again and return to your your presentation. We have a minute left, so I don't think there's enough time to ask those extra questions you had, Kuda and Hajar. I'm sorry. But perhaps we can connect with Camilla. I'd like to use the remaining time to thank her again for joining us and giving that presentation. And I'm sure this is only the beginning of the conversation with the ILO and with civil society in our constituencies. And I'd also like to remind the viewers who are watching now that in 10 minutes we will be live again with a new hearing. Do reload the CAN International YouTube channel at the hour to see the new hearing going live. So thanks once again.